Hey, what's up YouTube? Today on the channel we are going to do a head-to-head comparison of the Sur-Ron X Black against this Nicot EBEAST. It's not apples to apples comparison, but just to see if this Sur-Ron could actually do and climb the trails that this EBEAST can do. Both bikes are stock, and basically that EBEAST is 3 times almost the power. We're talking about tight trails, rocky climbs, and we're going to find out how the Sur-Ron does against this single track trail, and if it can be basically used as such. The trail we're riding today, as you know, we're here in Utah, is up American Fork Canyon, and the trail is called Mill Canyon Trail. At the base of the trail, we're about 6,400 feet, and at our peak we get up to 9,600 plus feet, giving us a total elevation climb of around 3,400 feet. Maybe down here on this lower trail, I take a minute to talk about why I was excited to do this test and this trail with my buddy here and get a chance to switch back and forth between the EBEAST and the Sur-Ron. If you've heard in my other channels, I have an EBEAST coming and it's scheduled to be delivered soon. I am also questioning whether I want to keep it or not, or just invest in another Sur-Ron. Now, this is not the answer for everybody, but for me and the type of riding I do, and I have a family, it might be the best option for me. And this was kind of a good test to see, can the Sur-Ron go where the EBEAST will go, and would it be even remotely fun? And if so, would I want to keep the Sur-Ron and to get another Sur-Ron, or keep the EBEAST as a secondary bike? My argument is this. Yeah, the EBEAST is a full-size motorcycle, and it handles this trail way better than the Sur-Ron. But the Sur-Ron can ride this trail. Also, for me, I do a lot of urban exploration, riding around town. I live really close to the base of some mountain trails, and I like to be able to ride to the trail. You can't really do that on the EBEAST. It's a full-size bike, and everybody would look at it just like that. What are you doing here with that big thing? You know, you can't ride that on the road. The Sur-Ron gets away with a lot of that in town in urban areas. And so if I have 2 Sur-Rons, I'm able to take one of the kids or the wife and just go from a house up to a trail, do a picnic, something like that. Whereas if I have an EBEAST and a Sur-Ron, I can't really just do that right from the house. I have to actually transport the bikes and go somewhere. So this was a good test for me to decide, do I want to keep the EBEAST or possibly sell it and get a Sur-Ron and do a few upgrades, like, you know, a new controller, tires, bypass the battery, get some more power, and have one of the Sur-Rons capable of doing this trail even better, and the other one just for the family to ride when we do go from the house into the urban areas. So basically, if your primary riding is going to be single track trail or enduro or any gnarly type of terrain, and that's mostly what you do, the EBEAST is a great pick. And my buddy Feathers here has 2 bikes in his arsenal, and the other is a KTM 450, and he reaches for the EBEAST most of the time. It's well suited for everything that he wants to do. It's great. It has hardly any maintenance, and you can go very slow without having to worry about clutch or cutting out or stalling or anything like that. So, you know, in his type of riding, what he likes to do, that EBEAST is a great bike, and he really does like it. It's a good machine. My dirt bike background is more, well, I barely sold a CRF 450 before I got the Sur-Ron, and most of the time I was riding either sand dunes or track, and that was my primary riding. So these types of trails are very new to me, not something I would have done even on my 450. It was set up for race, it was set up for track riding, and riding this kind of trail would have been a nightmare on that bike, honestly, trying to keep it going slow enough without overheating and dealing with all that kind of stuff. But I really do enjoy this trail riding, and the Sur-Ron actually performed very well. It's so light and easy to maneuver, and it's just a blast to ride anyway. Now I want to take a minute to talk about why I think electric bikes, in my opinion, are great for this type of thing. Basically, it's a turn the key and go scenario. There's no noise. It's a huge advantage just to be able to hear everything around you and not have to worry about all the engine noise and everything else. Let's talk about temperature. I'm not listening to my bike overheating or worrying about it overheating all the time. Let's talk about maintenance. I don't have to go back home and replace or clean the air filter and change my oil. I literally just go back, plug it in, clean it off, wait for the next ride. And to me, that's what I'm looking for. I've spent many years riding motocross and doing dirt bike and maintenance on that, and I basically stopped riding for years because I just didn't want to deal with the maintenance, changing the air filter, changing the oil all the time. And it just felt like it was so often I was doing more maintenance than I was riding, and it just kind of wore on me. So looking for an electric bike was primary for me. I wanted to do this, enjoy it, and not have to worry about that. You know, replace tires, replace brake pads, call it a day. So the Sur-Ron and the EBEAST both fit that bill. Yeah, the EBEAST does have a gearbox, and there's going to be some maintenance there eventually, but for the most part, he rides, he charges. He rides, he charges. He's not cleaning an air filter. He's not having to change his motor oil and deal with all that. And there's something to be said about that. It's just nice to do this type of riding. I mean, these bikes handle just as good as any, combustion engine bike. So I think for this type of riding, and people will say range is the thing. Well, I'm out of shape, I guess. So, I still ended this trip with 50% battery on the Sur-Ron, and I was tired. I don't think I could have gone much longer. And at 50% to charge it full again is about an hour and a half. So I needed a rest for at least an hour and a half, and I could have charged it again if I needed to. So for me, and it's opinion, I think that the electric bikes are the wave, and it's going to be exciting to see how it goes in the future. Okay, let's talk about spec comparisons between the two bikes. On the Sur-Ron, we have a 60 volt, 5400 watt, 32 amp hour battery. Both the tires on that bike are 19-inch stock wheels, and the brakes are dual piston hydraulic, which I find are actually pretty good. Suspension on the front is an inverted 8-inch travel KKE mountain bike front fork, and then they have a Sur-Ron adjustable multi-link rear suspension on the back, which I have adjusted both the front and the back shocks, and it does pretty well. It is a little bouncy sometimes, and I figure I still need to do some tweaking on the rebound, but overall I think it's pretty good. Okay, for the EBEAST, we have a 72 volt, 12 kilowatt, 50 amp hour battery. The tires it's running are a standard motocross setup with 80-121 on the front and 110-90-18 on the rear. The brakes, I'm not exactly sure of the specs on those. They are hydraulic, big rotor disc brakes, and completely adequate for any type of riding. The suspension, according to them, is their version of a Fast Ace. I don't think it is Fast Ace. It's just kind of a knockoff Fast Ace type of suspension for both front and rear. The EBEAST also comes with a 4-speed gearbox with neutral being all the way down and then 4 up. Alright, now we're going to take a moment to talk about the size difference. You can see in this thumbnail shot up in the left corner the visible size difference. We're talking the Sur-Ron is a very small bike. It is not anywhere near the size of a normal motorcycle. The Nicot EBEAST is about the size of a 125 to 250, I would say, somewhere in that range. It feels full size, it rides high. Everything about it is telling you motocross. Where the Sur-Ron is kind of like a mountain bike, barely bigger than a mountain bike. In fact, smaller than most mountain bikes, which could be an advantage if you think about how nimble it is and easy to flick around, but also a disadvantage with the EBEAST being able to handle a lot of this terrain with ease, and the little Sur-Ron kind of struggling in some areas. Keep in mind we are talking about a stock Sur-Ron, where I think some bigger tires, maybe a 16-inch rear, and riser handlebars would make a huge difference in this type of terrain for the Sur-Ron. It would completely change up the bike, and then maybe even a little power upgrade, but that's not even necessary. It handles the trails fine, but just the tires and the handlebars would make a huge improvement.
Okay.
Here we've switched over to the EBEAST, and immediately out of the gate, the power is crazy obvious. It's
This way.
unbelievable how much torque 12 kilowatts will put down on that rear wheel. And the fact that it has a gearing ratio, I think most of the time, in fact all the time I'm riding this bike, I'm in second gear, which is kind of like a good rounded gear for this type of riding. You don't need to be in first unless you're going to climb something seriously steep or go down some steep hills where you want the engine braking. And third is for anything above like 30 miles an hour. So second gear is kind of like an all-around gear for this type of riding. But the bike is noticeably taller, feels like it's just rolling over some of this stuff, where the Sur-Ron, you have to pay attention. You have to actually watch where you're going, pick good lines. The EBEAST just kind of breezes over this stuff, which is expected. It's a full-size dirt bike. So yeah, that comparison there, the power and the handling on this type of terrain, you know, that EBEAST is well suited for this. The size difference here becomes pretty apparent for my buddy Feathers. He's a bit taller than I am, and the lower handlebars and the lower seat height, it makes him struggle a lot. He does not feel comfortable standing up. He has to sit down for it to be comfortable. Then the suspension is not very forgiving because you're sitting down, and it made for an awkward ride for him. He's just not used to it. I've been riding it for a bit, so I've got a lot of seat time on that bike where I can handle all that kind of stuff, but it can be awkward for sure. And I think, you know, there are a few mods that you can make to make the seat height higher. Obviously I'm planning on getting some riser bars, you know, maybe a 3-4 inch rise on the handlebars, which would make a huge difference for standing up. You just don't feel very comfortable leaning that far over the front of the bike. It's very noticeable on the decline when we're descending down this mountain. You know, my arms were very tired from leaning so far over when standing up, so I'd have to sit down and take some of these bumps, you know, right in the tush. But basically some riser bars would fix that right up, and definitely will be a worthwhile investment. Another point to go over between the EBEAST and the Sur-Ron would be on this descent, brakes. And yes, the Sur-Ron has regen and 2 brakes on the handlebars, which is, I think, an advantage. I like having both brakes on the handlebar. I think, and this is a guy coming from, a CRF 450 where I had foot brake, but I really find it convenient to have that handbrake. I'm used to it now. I know that Feathers was it was hard for him to get used to that, not reaching for that foot brake and not finding it. And yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be able to just have your brakes just right there, right ready for you. On the EBEAST, basically, I was just probably like him. I was struggling. I forgot that there was a foot brake. The bumps were kind of kicking me up a little bit, and sometimes that just causes your foot to come off the pegs a little bit, or lose that braking ability, and I kind of struggled a few times. But that's just personal preference. I just happen to become a fan of the single speed dual handbrake of the Sur-Ron, and it fits my style. Not everybody's going to like the handbrakes like I do, I guess, but again, that's rider preference. Right here we're approaching this huge mud bog, and it was like 10 yards long and about 6 to 8 inches deep, and kind of crazy. The Sur-Ron kind of just mucked right through it, no problem, but out of nowhere, weird mud bog. Coming up is the crash I had on the trail, and as I was descending down these trails, I was trying to dodge a rock and steered a little too far right and hit the tree with my handlebars, and you can hear it hit pretty hard, but I'll let you guys listen.
Oh. Yep. Ah, shit.
I pinched my finger pretty good in that tree, broke skin and everything. But, also I wanted to talk about the steering here. Like a normal motocross bike, the handlebars are mounted right to the tree and the triple clamps, but on the Sur-Ron it has a headset, much like a mountain bike. And that's because the parts are really just not very durable. So if you were to take a crash and it was mounted to your triple tree, then you possibly break your triple tree, or your forks would be damaged. In this case, the head stem turns and your tire is just kind of wonky from your handlebars. I'm going to be releasing a video on how to fix some suspension stiction after a crash like that, which is something you should do if you have to adjust that front tire like I just did. It will compromise your suspension a little bit until you actually relieve that stiction. On the way down, I was kind of measuring how much regen I would get out of this, and Sur-Ron has that regen. I think I gained about 5% battery on the way back down. I ended this whole trip with around 50% battery, where the EBEAST does not have any regen, but you can rely on that gearbox to do some engine braking on the way down. So yeah, my brakes are probably getting a little hotter than his. The regen doesn't actually slow you down a ton by default, and I have it on the hardest level of regen. So as we approach the bottom, I'm just going to give my final thoughts on this comparison. Riding both bikes and doing what we did. A few things I want to point out. The quality of the Sur-Ron is very impressive. The bike is solid. It feels solid. It has no weird things happening, and that's something the EBEAST, it doesn't have that same feeling of the quality. You can feel a little bit of a difference there. Also, the portability of the Sur-Ron. You know, I don't have a truck, and like I said, I live close to the foothills, so I like to ride the bike to the trails. But also, I can fit this bike in my RAV4, and I can do it by myself. And I'll also be releasing a video on that, just a quick video on how you can stuff this bike in your car. So if you don't have a truck, you know, that's another point. I've looked at getting a truck, but at this time, you know, I can just jam it in my car. So that part's cool too. The other thing would be just use case. You know, again, my use case is urban exploration, occasional trails like this, and being able to ride with the family. But if you're doing this type of trail day in and day out, or every weekend, and that's what you mostly do, the EBEAST was surely the victor on this trail.